So today we want to talk about progressive discipline, and I titled this an alternative to timeout. And wouldn't it be nice if we had a timeout chair to put employees in for those that are quote-unquote acting up, doing something that is not acceptable in terms of their performance. Unfortunately, in the corporate world, we don't have a timeout chair. So what we need to do is we need to come up with a process in order to let people know that their performance is unacceptable. And that process we're going to talk about is progressive discipline. And I strongly advocate that that's a great key to work with employees in order to return their unacceptable behavior to acceptable levels. Today our agenda is we're going to talk about the purpose of progressive discipline. We're going to talk about the intent, which I think is extremely important. We're going to talk about the process. Then we're going to talk about documentation. And as you know, being human resource people, documentation is so very important in a lot of things that we do. We're going to talk about tips for successful discipline, why supervisors and managers resist the process, the HR role in the process, and then we're going to conclude with some final comments. So to start with, what's the purpose? And the purpose is to formally notify employees that work performance is not meeting acceptable levels. And it sounds so simple, but it's something that a lot of companies really resist doing. But think about it. If your performance was unacceptable, wouldn't you want to know that so that you could do things in order to return it to acceptable levels? Well, I think most of our employees would like to know that. So the purpose of really progressive discipline is to let employees know what's going on in terms of their meeting standards and expectations. And if they're below levels, then to let them know what they need to do in order to return their performance again to acceptable levels. So again, it's just to formally notify employees. It's just to start that process so that, you know, the light goes on and so they're aware that something is amiss in terms of their performance. The intent is to be a warning notice, a tool to help you explain to the employee what is unacceptable and to give them an opportunity to change behavior or performance through corrective action, which would be either the employee motivation to change by maybe extending consequences, or corrective action may include training. Maybe somebody is not well trained in something or needs retraining in something, and once they go through that retraining, then their performance is acceptable. What the intent shouldn't be is to be the first rung on the ladder to termination. And I think this is so very important because I know in a lot of organizations today, when employees are sat down and they're told that their performance is unacceptable, it's a foregone conclusion that in 2 weeks, 30 days, 60 days, they're out the door. So it just starts a long, slow process of exiting somebody from the organization. Well, my perspective on progressive discipline is 180 degrees different. And it starts with that first conversation. Think of it this way. If you sit down with an employee and you start off the conversation something like this, you know, we value your employment with us. And because of that, I want to let you know that there's a certain aspect of your performance that's not up to par. And then you start with that communication. It's a very nurturing environment, so you let the employee know that you do value them, that you want to let them know what is unacceptable, and you want to give them an opportunity to return their performance to acceptable. If you really didn't care about the employee, then you probably wouldn't talk to them, and you'd let the employee performance get so bad that the only alternative would be termination. So by sitting down and having this conversation, you're really telling the employee, hey, I care about you. And so as you start the progressive process, that first conversation is really going to be the impetus that's either going to help that employee to be successful and to give them the motivation to be successful, or if you don't have that nurturing conversation, you know, it's probably going to be a situation where you don't have that nurturing bent to your conversation, the employee is probably not going to buy into this whole process, and they're probably going to be gone anyway. And we've had some prior webinars where we've talked about interviewing and we've talked about the cost of turnover. So not only is employee progressive discipline programs, are they good because we can retain the employees with us, but it's also a financial program because we know that employee turnover costs about 50% of the annual cost for an employee. So if we can retain the employee, if we can return them to acceptable performance, then that's just a win-win-win for everybody. Okay, let's talk about the process. And really, it's a 3- or 4-step process. The first step is a verbal discussion. And so it's where the manager or supervisor is going to sit down with that employee, again, in that nurturing conversation, and let them know that a certain aspect of their performance is not meeting expectations. I want to tell them, hey, you're showing up late. I've noticed in the last 2 weeks you've been late, 5 times. That's not acceptable, and you need to be, here's what you need to do to be acceptable. Again, if it's a training issue, we need to give more coaching, more instruction. Maybe we need some computer-based training. Maybe there's a book they can use to come up to speed. Maybe they just need to observe somebody. Maybe they need a buddy to work with. So in that aspect, if it's a training issue, they need more coaching and more education. Again, if it's a motivation issue where they've been tardy or late for work, maybe their quality has been suffering, maybe the quantity of work has been suffering. So in that realm, we need to give them some consequences. We need to know what you expect. We need to know, you need to communicate to them that it's up to them whether they change their behavior to meet their expectations. You know that they can, but the question is, will they? So once you address it's either a training issue and here's what you need to do, here's what we're going to provide to you, or it's a motivation issue, here's what you need to do to change your behavior, then it's done. You've told them what's unacceptable, you've told them what they need to do to be acceptable, and then you want to agree on a plan of action. Do we agree that you need some more training, that you're going to take time for these classes, or do you agree that you're going to do what you need to do in order to show up on time? So the verbal discussion is really that first step. And you might say, as part of that, we'll have another conversation, say in 2 weeks or in 30 days, and we're going to assess the progress of how you're doing. So you want to put some checkpoints in there as well, so that they know that this isn't just a one-time conversation and it's gone and they never hear back from you. No, you want to make sure that you have a checkpoint in there. Because let's say that we go to 30 days out and the behavior has not changed, or whatever is unacceptable and their performance has not changed. Now we're going to follow up with step 2, and this will be the first written warning. And so now we're going to document in writing what you see happening and what they need to do in order to correct the behavior. So again, tardiness, it might be something like in the last 2 weeks you've been late for work 10 or 15 minutes 3 times. I need to make it clear that you need to show up for work on time and be at your desk ready by 8:30 or whatever time your work starts. So that would be an example of how we document a behavioral problem where we're going to tell them what they need to do. If it's, let's say you're dealing with somebody that processes files, you may say the average caseload is, say, 45 active files. Your caseload has dropped to 35. You need to increase the caseload within a week so that by X date you are having a caseload of, say, 45. And then, again, can we agree on this plan of action? And then, again, we're going to give it 2 weeks, 30 days to improve. And what you want to say in this written warning is failure to come up to speed on what we have laid out will result in further disciplinary action. And again, you're telling them, so, we've had that verbal conversation, first of all. We're still seeing unacceptable patterns. We're going to lay it out in writing. Here's what's happening. Here's what you need to do. We're going to tell them that the consequence of meeting the expectations will be further disciplinary action.